Alright guys, so in this video I'm going to be talking about Errol the Truth Spence and whether I think he's stuck in Crawford or not. On top of that, I'm going to be elaborating on certain checkpoints of Spence's career, as well as speaking about certain events that have occurred to him in his career. So stay tuned for that. But before I get into all of that properly though, there's a few things I want to speak about, and one of which is that in this channel with me, one thing you're always going to get is complete objectivity. Whether you agree or disagree with what I'm saying in this video and in future videos, just know that my perception is coming from a place of objectivity and my perception is grounded in logic. Because whether I like a fighter or dislike a fighter, I'm always going to be fair, objective and unbiased with my assessment, with my analysis and with my judgment. And this leads me to say this. Amongst boxing fans, you get certain fanboys. I'm not a fanboy of any fighter. And how do I class a fanboy? How do I define a fanboy? Well, in my view, a fanboy is someone that has an extreme attachment towards a particular fighter or fighters, because it can be more than one fighter. And they let that extreme attachment that they possess, they let it cloud their judgment or cloud their perception of reality. And as a result now, they have an inability to be unbiased and an inability to be objective whenever they're assessing that fighter or whenever they're talking about that fighter or judging that fighter, etc. And they're incapable of being impartial. That's how I would define a fanboy. Because in this video, right, I'm going to be giving my views on Spence and giving my opinions and critiquing him to some extent as well as giving him credit where credit is due about the good things he's done in his career as well. But a lot of my opinions are going to be predicated on facts. And guys, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, because with me you're gonna get consistent uploads. And hit the bell notification as well. Hit the like button. But yeah, let's get into it. So when Spence was on the come up, like when he was a young professional, like this guy was calling out everybody. Like he wanted all the top guys. Like as he said in various interviews, he's been calling out Keith Thurman since he was 15-0. And this was when Thurman was in most people's eyes the best welterweight in the division. Like this was even before Spence fought Bundu and Algieri, guys like that. So Spence also later on went on to call out Kell Brook, also called out Danny Garcia, Sean Porter, before all those fights were made. Like Spence wanted all the smoke. Like strap season. Like that's what he was on. That was his motto. Also as well, like when Spence was a young pro, a prospect back in around 2013, he had only been a pro for about a year. I mean, so pretty fresh off the Olympics. Like there were a lot of rumors coming from the gyms in the States that he was giving a lot of the top pros a hard time in sparring. One of which being Floyd Mayweather. Like a lot of people may know the sparring stories that are out there, and I believe a lot of pro fighters and trainers as well witnessed the sparring. They saw the sparring. They were there. And word on the grapevine is Spence gave Floyd a black eye in sparring, and he was out there trying to take Floyd's head off, trying to knock him out. And he actually gave Floyd such a tough time in sparring. Like Floyd ended up kicking Spence out of his gym because in his eyes he saw it as disrespectful, and he was probably embarrassed. His ego couldn't take it. I mean, he's probably angry as well. And although this is not official news, and even though there's no footage of the sparring session, I believe that Spence did do that to Floyd in sparring. I believe that Spence did, give Floyd a hard time in sparring, and he did give Floyd a black eye because, like, in this situation especially, there's no smoke without fire. So, yeah, at the very least, there's at least some truth in the story, because let's not forget, Floyd has never denied any of the sparring rumors, and if it wasn't true, someone like Floyd as well, he would have definitely denied it, in my opinion. So the fact that he hasn't denied it just shows to me that it's, yeah, like this is why, like, I suspect that it's either 100% accurate or largely accurate at the very least. So anyway, after the whole sparring situation, Floyd and Spence, they made up and everything. and like they were cool. Like everything was cool between them. Floyd even tried to like big bro him, if you guys get what I mean. Like he even tried to sign him. Like he even tried to mentor him and things like that. The reason I bring that up, like the reason why it's relevant, is because it showed to me that Spence was different. Like he was different in a good way, because a lot of the pros at the time, like Devin Alexander, Adrian Broner, Lamont Peterson, etc., they were, I mean, they were kissing Floyd's ass. Like, let's be real, they were. Like, they were being excessively complimentary to Floyd, speaking about Floyd like he was a fan. And like like they would talk about him as if he was a fan. Like they would talk about him as if he was a retired fighter, instead of talking about him like he's a rival, because that's what he was at the time. Floyd was still competing. Floyd was a rival, so they should be speaking about Floyd like he's a rival, not talking to him like he's a fan. So they gave him way too much respect, more than they should. Those guys, Broner, Peterson, Devin Alexander, etc. They gave Floyd way too much respect, more than they should. And Spence kind of broke that mold. I mean, coming in there, trying to take Floyd's head off, trying to knock him out, giving him a black eye, etc. Like, so that impressed me, because not only did it show Spence's elite level potential, it showed that he had that don't take no for an answer, blue collar, I mean, mindset, man down mindset, which is which is conducive to being successful at the highest level in the sport. And it also showed that he wasn't going to fold in high pressure situations. Because in the Floyd gym, in the Mayweather gym, the people watching, like whenever you're sparring Floyd, people watching like the session, they try and rile you up. They try and throw you off your game with all the chanting and shouting and all that stuff. They try and make you nervous, basically, and like banging the canvas and things like that. And but Spence just smiled and laughed. He wasn't the least bit perturbed. Like he wasn't perturbed at all. He remained mentally strong, remained confident. So he wasn't crumbling under the pressure. No, like he remained calm, remained focused. And not only did this guy give Mayweather a hard time in sparring, he also gave Adrian Broner problems too. And they say that he stopped Broner in sparring. And Broner even confirmed it in an interview. So since he wasn't anxious during those sparring sessions with Floyd and with AB, I just knew that this guy, Spence, like he wasn't going to fold or freeze when he fought Kell Brook in Sheffield. Like, because these sparring situations, they gave me an insight into Spence's mental fortitude. So sparring, it does mean something. Because some people like to say, oh, sparring doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. No, like it does mean something. Because you can deduce and tell quite a bit about a fighter's mentality and about a fighter's potential from sparring. Obviously, it's not the be all and end all. It's not the real fight, but nevertheless, it can tell you quite a few things about a fighter. So Spence now went on to beat Brook in his first world title fight in a very good win, away from home in hostile territory. Kell Brook fans booing Spence, shouting at him. Do you know what I mean? And Spence, like I said, remained calm, remained focused, didn't fold. And Spence had to make adjustments in there, because Brook was winning some of the early rounds. But yeah, Spence, he kept digging to that body, kept breaking Brook down, and he eventually stopped Brook. So after beating Brook, now Spence continues to call out Keith Thurman. And I remember that interview with Brian Custer, where Brian Custer was talking to Deontay Wilder, Thurman, and Spence, and they were all sat there at the table. This was back in 2018, and Custer said, "Oh, Brian Custer said, oh, everybody and their mama want to see Spence and Thurman fight. That's the fight the whole boxing world wants to see." That's what Brian Custer said. And Spence responded by saying that, oh, he wants that fight as bad as he wants to breathe. He said, I want that fight as bad as I want to breathe. Like, I'm going to be the undisputed champ. I'm ready to go through Thurman. I've been calling out Thurman since I was 15 and now everybody knows that. So, yeah, Spence at the time, he was constantly reiterating that. The fact that his ultimate goal was to be the undisputed champ. And at the time, he was putting pressure on Thurman, a lot of pressure on Thurman, and yeah, he was putting pressure on all the top welterweights, to be honest. And you could tell that Thurman, like, he didn't want that fight, at least not yet. Like, even at the table, you could tell from his body language, like, he didn't want any of that smoke, at least not yet. So, yeah. But Spence's behavior now and his habits started to change, when Bud came into the division. So Spence gets asked in an interview with Max Kellerman and Stephen A. Smith back around early 2018, before the Lamont Peterson fight. And at this time, this is when Crawford had just moved up to welterweight, but before he had any fights at welterweight. And Max Kellerman now asks him, "Oh, do you want to fight Crawford?" And Spence says something like words to the effect of, "Oh," Spence said words to the effect of, "Let Crawford get a belt first, then we can talk, then we can make that fight happen." And he said the fight will definitely happen. That's what he said. The fight will definitely happen. And that's a fair answer, fair enough. Bud didn't really have too much to offer at the time. He didn't have a belt. Do you know what I mean? So Spence saying that is totally understandable. And at that point, no one could say Spence was ducking. So during the year now 2018, Spence stopped both Lamont Peterson and Ocampo. Crawford goes on to stop Jeff Horn and gets a belt, gets that WBO belt. And towards the back end of 2018 now, Spence gate crashed the Danny Garcia, Sean Porter post-fight press conference. And he started talking about where he was saying that, oh, Crawford's on the wrong side of the street, implying that Bud being with Top Rank and him being with Al Heyman prevents the fight from happening because of politics, which is absolute BS, absolute nonsense from Spence. Like, I did not like hearing that wrong side of the street talk at all, because Sean Porter fought Terence Crawford while Crawford was still with Top Rank and Porter with Al Heyman, just like Spence. So we know that was some BS excuse from Spence that he was making there. Even before that whole Porter Crawford fight, like, you could tell, anyone that knows boxing in depth knows that whole wrong side of the street talk was just nonsense, was just BS. On top of that as well, like, Porter Crawford wasn't the first time in history where a top rank fighter fought an Al Heyman fighter. It's happened before. What happened to the Spence that was talking about being the undisputed welterweight champ? That wanted all the smoke from all the top welterweights. What happened to that Spence? But now he's making up this talk about, making up this term about wrong side of the street. Like, the guy's making up streets to avoid his rival. Nah, like, I did not like that from Spence. Like, I was disappointed. I'm not gonna lie, I was disappointed. So, like, Spence, like, he's not keeping the same energy with Bud that he had with Furman, because he wanted all the smoke with Furman. With Furman, but not with Bud though, not with Crawford. And Crawford had a belt. Crawford had a belt now after beating Jeff Horn. So why don't you want to fight him? On top of that, like he went against his word, because he wasn't saying all of this in that Max Kellerman interview. I mean, which was prior to Crawford beating Jeff Horn. I mean, before Bud beat Horn, like I said, in that interview with Kellerman, like, and Stephen A. Smith, like, he said he would fight Bud after Crawford gets a belt. Like, he wants to be the undisputed champ. But when Crawford gets a belt now he wants to make excuses to avoid the fight. Now he wants to make excuses to avoid fighting Crawford. Excuses that are, for one, they're not valid, and for two, like, he wasn't saying any of this wrong side of the street talk before Crawford beat Horn. So, yeah, like, I wasn't impressed by that at all. I did not like hearing that at all from Spence. And you combine this with the fact that Spence went from being this extremely dedicated guy that was always in the gym to being this guy that gets overweight in between fights, drinking quite a bit as well. Like, when he gatecrashed that interview, that Garcia Porter interview, just to go back to that, like, he was looking a bit bloated, especially for an athlete standards. He was looking a bit bloated. So probably somewhat close to 200 pounds his weight. But then, bearing in mind, he competes at 147. So it's like he lost a bit of that hunger, that ambition, that work ethic. So this guy was extremely dedicated and ambitious. But towards the back end of 2018 now, like, he lost, well, at least to some extent, his mentality changed. Like, even for the first press conference for the Spence Porter fight, Spence came in there looking a little bit overweight. I mean, so yeah, Spence's mentality changed. He wasn't really speaking about wanting to be the undisputed champ, at least not as much. And so all of this, like, this leads me back to the question that I posed in the beginning of this video, which was, is Spence ducking Crawford? And to be honest, My answer is yes. My answer is yes. I think he is ducking Crawford, in my opinion. And my opinion is based on facts, because such as the facts I've mentioned in this video, like Spence has gone against his word, he's contradicted himself, like so on and so forth. Like, but there is one caveat though that I want to add, and that's that if Spence fights Crawford now after the Ugas fight, I would have to say I was wrong. Like, yeah, like I would have to say I was wrong. So that would show because that would show that Spence just wanted to get all three belts first before fighting Crawford. If he fights Crawford after the Ugas fight, obviously assuming that Crawford doesn't have a fight where he looks over the hill or a fight where he looks extremely vulnerable before before then. But if if Spence fights Crawford now, and he fights Crawford after Crawford has a fight where he looks over the hill or washed up or too old or vulnerable, etc., or even a fight where Crawford looks a lot more hittable or vulnerable than he usually looks, like a fight where you see a lot more chinks in Crawford's armor. Like if something like that happens, then you would have to say that Spence did duck Crawford all that time, because that would mean he intentionally waited until Crawford was more vulnerable and before making that fight happen. So hopefully you guys get what I'm saying now. Essentially, future context is important. Is important. Future context is important when determining whether Spence is ducking Crawford or not. That's what I'm basically getting at here. But yeah, like I said, in my opinion, I would have to say Spence is ducking Crawford for the reasons I stated. And in terms of Spence Ugas now, like I think that if Spence is still somewhat close to the fighter that he was pre-car crash, then I'd pick him to beat Ugas. But yeah, that's just my thoughts. But anyway, that's it for this video. So guys, leave your comments in the comment section regarding everything I've said. Do you agree? Do you disagree? And why so? And what do you think? What do you guys think about Spence's career so far as well? But yeah, that's it for this video, and until next time.